Good afternoon. Today we're asking, are fixed price contracts good or bad for your business? I'm joined by Graham Potts, a chartered accountant and managing director at our accounting firm Wessex Commercial. With an eye for numbers and years of hands-on experience running corporate and his own business, especially dealing with contracts, Graham is great at understanding the issues business owners face running their own businesses and coming up with real life experience of how to solve these issues. We're live on LinkedIn and very happy to take questions as we go through today. If you have questions, pop them in the comments and we'll try and pick those up as we go along. Graham, I know today you want to talk about fixed price contracts and are asking, are they good or bad for your business? So is there a straight answer, yes or no?
Thanks, Linda. And as you might expect from someone like me, simple answer is no, there's no straight answer.
Okay, can you explain more?
Fixed price contracts come in many forms, such as sales contracts, where you're giving fixed prices for, say, construction or maintenance contracts, or where you supply food and drink, especially to, say, a large supermarket. Mm-hmm. They're also relevant in your cost base, as you may have suppliers on fixed prices, such as a lease for premises or vehicles. And most of us also have other fixed price contracts in the overhead, such as telecoms, your mobile phone, software costs, etc.
So nearly every business will have a fixed price contract in one form or other.
Yes, they do. And they are becoming more relevant. For instance, we as accountants, we always give fixed price contracts to our clients, so they have certainty on how much they're paying each month.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you explain what is fixed in a fixed price contract?
Yes, obviously the price, though that can be for a bunch of services. It can be per product. But the contract has other terms than that. It's not just the terms and conditions, but it also has something called scope or specification. For example, accountants love widgets. So if we're talking about a widget, you need to know what, exactly the size, dimensions, the material, and the color of the widget are for that price. Yep. You also need to know how many widgets you're supplying and to what timescales. For instance, are you supplying 10,000 widgets in a week or over a period of a year? Because obviously that can affect your price. Furthermore, you need to know what the customer is responsible for, which is called attendances or dependencies. So for instance, it could be, are they picking up? Are they dealing with the logistics? Or say, for instance, in construction, are they providing a free forklift at your convenience, etc.? Mm-hmm. Never be a convenience, of course, not in construction. No. And what other contract items could be there, like terms and conditions, like, is there any inflationary clauses, and also like things like guarantees, bonds, etc. So you need to know quite a lot of what's in the contract.
Yeah. So there's a lot for people to consider.
Yes, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. So if any contract you're going into that has a major impact on your business, you should really take professional advice. For instance, if you take on a lease, you'll go to a solicitor. But what happens if you're tied into, say, a 10, 12, 15-year lease? That's too long. You need to have things like break clauses in there so that after a period that you'll know what's happening, that you can get in and out of that contract. Or a sales contract where, what happens if you've got a sales contract where there's a large percentage of your turnover and your cost base suddenly increases dramatically? What do you do then? So you've got to understand what's in that contract.
Yeah, it's planning for all of those eventualities. Can you explain what some of the common pitfalls are that people might experience, Graham, and how they can mitigate those risks?
Yes, I'll give you some examples. I've already mentioned like the lease. If you've got 10, 12, 15-year lease, put some break clauses in. It's quite common to have 3 years. You might be able to get to, you may want to go for 5, but you need to have a break clause that you can come in and out of it, just in case you want to move to bigger or smaller premises. Over the last 18 months, 2 years, we've all experienced increased labor, material, and other costs. So if you're selling at fixed prices, you have to look at what happens. I mean, this caught everybody out how much everything's gone up by. So look to have inflationary clause inserted based on your largest costs, whether that's labor, materials, whatever. And what happens, if we've all had supply chain issues. So are you penalized for non-performance? This can be a real risk, especially when you're under pressure to perform and and then you've got to subcontract out, which costs a lot more money, etc. So look about having some sort of in clause there for, like force majeure, but if you can't get it for some reason or another.
And by force majeure, you're talking about things that are outside your control.
Outside your control. But I mean, the trouble is that we just don't know, we've had periods where you just couldn't get materials. Someone, the bigger boys, the bigger, businesses buy up everything suddenly, and you can't get it. So you might be, like having something that's like, say, a specific type of material. And if someone is wanting that material and they've bought up the only supply for the next 2 years, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
So you can't do anything. You have to change the material. So you need to have like those sort of, you got to think those sort of things as well. When there's something specialist or something like it's a little bit different. Fuel, that's increased, over the past, couple of years, and it goes up and down. Yes, it goes up and down with the oil price, but don't realize it's also the transportation links, getting it through the pipelines, sort of also the cost of actually refining it, etc. As well as the dollar rate has a major effect on it. So you've got to be, if you're dependent on materials from overseas, make sure you think about maybe a currency clause in case sterling weakens. Consider technological changes. For instance, if you're buying software, and that software, is it being updated? If you're on a contract for 2-3 years, are you getting constant updates? Otherwise, you could be out of, it could be old hat. And certainly watch contracts that continue after the initial period. My favorite pet hate is phones, mobile phones. They don't tell you, as we've experienced, that they don't tell you and drop the rate. So you pay for, say, 2-3 years, whatever it is. They try and tie you forever now, but they carry on at the same rate. They don't come and tell you that actually you've really paid for the phone in the first 2 years and will still charge you at that rate. So always look at those sort of contracts as well.
And, with all those risks, should people be thinking about not getting involved in those fixed contracts, or if they should, what are the benefits?
No, they should consider it. There's lots of fixed price contracts, and some's out. You've got to take them if you want to, like for instance, have fixed phones, etc. But always go in with your eyes open, especially when you're supplying, supplying, etc. I've discussed terms in risks earlier. But there is a benefit, is the first benefit I'd say is certainty. What you've got to pay or what you're going to receive, as long as you sort the contract out right, that the terms of payment and when you're going to get it. But so that makes it easier to control for budgeting, planning, etc. But with the risk I mentioned earlier, the market could swing the other way. So where labour and material prices have gone up, if sterling strengthens or whatever, suddenly you may be paying less for your imports. So that can maybe be a major benefit. So you really have to think what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah.
And obviously with heading into recession, where it was a weird one at the moment because prices are still going up in a lot of areas. But we're coming recession, will they come down in 6, 12, 18 months' time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It appears to me that you've got to look at each case on its merits, and if you've got any concerns, ask for help.
Exactly. Talk to your advisors, as they can often lead you through all the pitfalls and how to mitigate them. Though I would say, because like sometimes you have to take it, sometimes you negotiate that contract to help to get the better terms. Often I found, it's price, scope, dependencies, timing. That's something that you can usually negotiate. Often you can't negotiate much with the terms and conditions themselves, although you can say you can put a cap on it, like liquidated damages or something like that. But they can lead it through. But if you can't do it, they can also look at mitigation. Can you mitigate, like forward planning? The current like the currency. Can you buy forward or something? Or as that money comes in, can you actually have a forward rate that will change it into the sterling that that you're going to get?
Yeah. That absolutely makes sense. I wonder if we can look at an example of how a fixed price contract went well, Graham. I'm just going to pull up a spreadsheet that we've been talking through. Okay, I'll let you explain this one.
Hopefully everybody can see that. Yeah, this is a contract we were pricing in, as one of my companies pricing services overseas in dollars, but our costs were a mixture of dollars and sterling. So putting figures to it, the annual sales were roughly $3 million. The direct costs in dollars over in that country were 1 million. So if you take the net income in dollar terms, that was 2 million. But we had sterling costs as well. So the sterling, so what we did, if you divide the net income by the current sterling rate at the time, which was $1.50 to £1, we were receiving 1.33 million in sterling. Divided by, taking off the cost of 800,000, we were making 533,000. Now, the exchange rate then moved, and actually sterling weakened, dollar strengthened. So the exchange rate moved to $1.50. From 150 to 130. I'm getting tongue-tied. Down to 1 to 30. Now that meant the income of $2 million we were getting was divided by 1.3. So that was 1.5 million. And because the sterling cost had remained the same, that meant our gross profit had gone from 530,000 to 730. So we had increased profits by 200,000 with doing nothing. So it's one of those. Obviously, if the dollar had weakened and sterling had strengthened, it would have gone the other way.
Yeah. And those are things that you can, if you want to, make contingencies for, but obviously there are risks and benefits, and I guess appetite for risk and capacity to bear those losses if it went the other way. Let's look at an example where things went wrong, Graham.
Yeah, we all know like costs have gone like through the roof, and no one foresaw the massive increases. So this is a sad tale about a subcontractor in the house building industry. Had to fix their prices to win contracts. On first review, these contracts look good. They were priced just before COVID hit, and being priced at a decent margin of 40%. So you expect, even with price rises of 5-10%, they should have made decent money. But following COVID, then Brexit, and the ramping up on the new build at Hinkley Point, labour is in short supply, and actually it went up very, very quickly. In the early part of 2021 by about 30%. And similar over that first 3-6 months of 2021, materials more than doubled, as I think most of us have seen in the construction industry especially. This meant that the gross margin that was expected, what was expected was a gross margin of 800,000. But with the extra costs and all the costs going up, the actual gross margin dropped to nil. So instead of making a profit of 300,000, there was a anticipated loss coming forward, and started loss making of 500,000. Now, the company couldn't negotiate cost changes, because there was no provision for substantial changes in the contracts. And whilst most of the contracts were big corporates, they were not open to price increases. The business was struggling. And with these price rises over that period of about 3 months, they had no option in the end to close the business. They tried other means, but they closed the business. Yeah, and even if they had, even if the corporates had eventually negotiated, probably the process would probably have taken so long that, as you said, they'd have gone out of business anyway. Yeah, corporates don't move fast. It's not something that can be done in 3 to 6 months. It's usually longer. And they were so dependent on that money coming in. If they stopped work, they wouldn't have got any money anyway. So it was a lose-lose situation for them. Yeah. So is there anything else that you want to add? Only that you need to be fully aware of the risks in fixed price contracts and the benefits, obviously. But the risks, you need to look at how to minimise or mitigate them in case things go wrong. Yeah. So what should business owners do now, Graham, if they're in that position where they're either in or contemplating entering into a fixed contract? Well, I'm always saying, I keep on harping on about how vital it is that business owners understand their numbers, but it's also vital that they understand what the words mean in these contracts. This means understand exactly what you have to supply, what the other party is supplying, how your prices are made up, and what are the timings, the actual timings of delivery and payment. And what happens, if things go wrong, and are there other terms that you need to be aware of? Now, for instance, this is especially important with variations, knowing how they are instructed and valued, as I've seen so many cases where people, companies business have undertaken the work, but not got paid because they didn't have the right paperwork and they didn't go through the right process. So you have to be very strong with variations, and actually you have to realize you have a difference between the operational side, get the job done, whatever, and then, or production, and then you've got the commercial side that say, no, you've got to follow the process. So you've got to just basically make sure you do follow the process. Next, if you need to look at what happens if things go wrong, such as price increases, currency movements, supply issues, and if you work out what's fundamental to your business, what happens if it could go wrong, and then see if you can either negotiate in terms of the contract or, like I said, mitigate, like with forward buying a currency, etc. Yeah. If you can, and like I said, then what we need to do is look at what account system, you use. We advocate Xero because we believe with the right support, it will give you up-to-date, meaningful numbers that you need to run your business in today's world, the changing world. And it also says what margins you're making. So if you put your budgets in, you can manage against what the budgets are. And that's good and bad, because I've seen sometimes where people think, oh, great, we've made a lot of money, but they got the cutoff wrong and there's a big cost they've missed. So you need to have the right management information in your system. And cutoff is a big issue in all industries. And then look at other ways increasing your margins. For instance, negotiating, better prices, better delivery times, stock holdings with your supply chain. And if you can match the contracts, that is really good. So match your contracts with any suppliers. Yeah. And finally, I'd just say, in such a changing, uncertain, lonely world for business owners, you need good management information and support to help you make the right decisions for you and your business.
Graham, just want to bring up a comment that we've got now from Jonathan, who's asking, is fixed price contracts good only for the buyer in this current climate? I guess it's two questions. And how can you make sure you get paid by the buyer on time?
Thanks, Jonathan. Right. It's really, who's got a crystal ball exactly what's going to happen going forward? So when you're saying our contract's only good for the buyer, I think that'll change going forward. It will flip to the seller. Yeah. So, but where are we at that point? Not sure yet, but it's coming there. I really do think.
Graham, we've done exercises with clients and where they're in a fixed price contract, and we've been through their pricing and their build up of their costs to help them identify how they can actually improve their profits on those contracts. So I think there are some opportunities if you look closely enough and go for it. Is that fair?
There always are. I mean, when people have a bad contract, they tend to throw resource at it. Actually, you've got to look at it and see if you can do it a different way. And also, often you can talk to your customer and just say, I can't do this. Look, sorry, and ask the questions. How can I do this? My prices have gone up 40%. How can I deliver this? And talk to them. So that's the first thing I'd say. And just get advice. Just think laterally outside the box. How can you make sure you get paid on time? Again, it's the only thing I feel that, where you've got strong, look at the terms and conditions and that on there, but it's delivery. If someone's not paying you, you can, again, say they come up and chase you for that widget or that next, sort of part of the painting job. You say, well, how can I do it? Start asking them, how can I do that? How can I do that? What do you mean? Well, you haven't paid me, so I can't pay my supply chain. Yeah. So it's I would say with a lot of these things is try to, as much as you can, as much as sometimes that in these situations you fall out with your customer, and try and build good relations with your customer, because if they feel for you and want to help you, they will help you, and they will give you, they will try and make sure you're paid on time, and they will listen. But you have to understand your customer, and you have to have those relationships built up over time. It's not, so it does take time to build those relationships.
And what you were talking about earlier about following the process as well, I mean, that is a crucial part of getting paid on time, is having the right paperwork and making sure that your operations people understand that, despite the pressure there is sometimes to just get on and do certain work on site, you've got to make sure that you've got the documentation or the communications in place that mean that you'll get paid.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about process. And the bigger companies, if you don't deal with the process and you don't send the invoice to the right person, the right department, or copy it in somewhere, and you haven't got the right evidence supporting it, if there's things they want, make sure you've got that. Otherwise, they won't pay.
Yeah.
And they're very good at short paying or not paying. That's how they make money. So.
I know you talked about finance last time. There are obviously some options that people can look at if something like invoice financing might be helpful in certain situations. But it kind of I guess brings me on to it's probably a one-to-one conversation. And if any of the issues that we've talked about today resonate with you, then pop an email over to chatwithgraham@wesexcommercial.com and we'll set up a one-to-one meeting. Next time we are asking, why do businesses get caught out by long-term work in progress? So join us for that. If that's something that you're worried about, or perhaps even if you're not familiar with or really feel that you understand what work in progress is, we'll be having that conversation at 12:30 p.m. on Monday, the 5th of December. So thanks very much, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks.